Welcome to Walking with the Tengu, the podcast where we dig deep into the archaeological ruins of the past. There we find and excavate ancient lost treasures and explore how they apply to everyday life, including the world of martial arts. I'm your host, Matthew, and today we're returning to the second most famous Taoist text, the Zhuangzi. Way back in 2018 and 2019, I did a brief overview of two of the most famous Zhuangzi stories for martial artists, that of the Archer in the Cliff and Cook Ding. Today we're going to look at two more, which I'm going to call The Swimmer at the Waterfall and Training Fighting Roosters. These stories illustrate Taoist principles like Wuwei, effortless action, and Ziran, spontaneity, flowing with circumstances rather than forcing them, detachment from outcomes, and achieving mastery through deep familiarity rather than rigid technique or conscious striving. These ideas have deeply influenced Chinese internal martial arts like Tai Chi, Bagua, and Xingyi, where practitioners aim to move naturally, respond intuitively, and harmonize with an opponent's force rather than opposing it directly. Over my years of training, I've also found these ideas in other martial arts, though they're not often recognized as such, if at all, and if they are, they're called by different names. Now, if we can connect these ideas in the present to how they were communicated in the past, maybe we can stand on the shoulders of those who came before us and learn a lesson or two. First, let's wrap our heads around these two terms. Then we'll look at two stories from the work known as the Zhuangzi that illustrate them. The first is Wuwei, often translated as non-action or effortless action. It is a core Taoist principle from texts like the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. It doesn't mean literal inaction or laziness, far from it. Instead, it refers to acting in perfect harmony with the Tao, that is, the natural way of the universe, without unnecessary force, resistance, or ego-driven interference. It's about aligning your efforts with the flow of circumstances so that actions feel spontaneous and efficient, like water shaping rock over time without trying to. For martial artists, think of Wuwei as the pinnacle of technique, where power comes from relaxation and adaptation rather than brute strength. In practices like Tai Chi Chuan or internal styles like Bagua Zhang, Wuwei manifests as yielding to an opponent's attack, redirecting their force instead of clashing head-on. Imagine a push hands, that's Tui Shou drill. This is a fundamental partner training drill in Tai Chi Chuan and some other internal Chinese martial arts. Again, Bagua and Xingyi. It looks like a slow, flowing, continuous interaction between two people who maintain light, but constant contact with their arms, hands, forearms, while trying to feel, follow, yield to, and eventually disrupt each other's balance and root. For Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, imagine you're flow rolling with a partner and your win condition is just to disrupt your partner's base. In fact, as a side note, this is one of those concepts that is shared between the so-called internal arts and Jiu-Jitsu. What Jiu-Jitsu calls base, what I might define as the stable platform you create to effectively apply and absorb force during grappling, a strong base helps you maintain balance and control while making it difficult for your opponent to move you. As best I can tell, this is exactly what the Chinese internal arts are often referring to when they talk about root, just applied to grappling. In a push hands drill, if you tense up and push back aggressively, you waste energy and create openings. By embodying Wu Wei, you listen to the opponent's intent, neutralize it effortlessly, and counter with minimal exertion. Bruce Lee echoed this in his philosophy of being like water, adapting fluidly without rigid plans. So here's a training tip. The next time you're sparring, focus on breathing deeply and responding intuitively rather than forcing techniques. That's Wu Wei building your efficiency and longevity in the art. The next concept is Ziran, translated as naturalness, self-so, or spontaneity. This emphasizes living and acting in accordance with one's inherent nature, and the rhythms of the world, free from artificial constraints or overthinking. In Taoism, it's the state where things unfold as they should, like a tree growing without being told how. It's closely linked to Wuwei, as true non-action arises from this unforced, authentic state. In a martial arts context, Ziran is about cultivating movements that are instinctive and unpretentious, stripping away contrived forms to reveal your body's natural intelligence. External styles like Shaolin Gong Fu and Muay Thai might start with rigid drills, but mastery involves Ziran, where strikes, blocks, and footwork emerge organically from the situation, not from memorized patterns. For example, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu rolling sessions, a practitioner exhibiting Ziran doesn't plot every move. They feel the opponent's weight shift and transition seamlessly, like a vine wrapping around a branch. This naturalness reduces telegraphing, increases speed, and prevents burnout from overanalyzing. To apply it, during shadow boxing, shadow wrestling, or forms practice, let go of perfectionism. Allow your body to move as it wants, correcting only what's truly off balance. Over time, this builds a no mind, Mushin in Zen. That is Mushin in Zen, which is kind of like Ziran, a state making you unpredictable and resilient in real combat. Together, Wuwei and Ziran encourage martial artists to train beyond mechanics, fostering a mindset where the art becomes an extension of your natural self. They're not just philosophical fluff, they're practical tools for superior performance, injury prevention, and mental clarity in the dojo or ring. If you're drilling these concepts, I would also recommend consider starting your practice with some meditation, breathing exercises, or qigong to tune into that inner flow. So let's move on to the stories from the Zhuangzi now. These are from chapter 19, titled Da Xiang, which might be translated as the full understanding of life, or maybe mastering life. The first story I'm calling The Swimmer at the Waterfall. As always, you can find both the original Chinese and English translations of these works at ctext.org. Confucius was looking at the cataract near the gorge of Lu, which fell a height of 240 cubits, and the spray of which floated a distance of 40 li, producing a turbulence in which no tortoise, gavial, fish, or turtle could play. He saw, however, an old man swimming about in it, as if he had sustained some great calamity and wished to end his life. Confucius made his disciples hasten along the stream to rescue the man, and by the time they had gone several hundred paces, he was walking along, singing, with his hair disheveled and enjoying himself at the foot of the embankment. Confucius followed and asked him, saying, "I thought you were a sprite, but when I look closely at you, I see that you're a man. Let me ask if you have any particular way of treading the water." The man said, "No, I have no particular way. I began to learn the art at the very earliest time. As I grew up, it became my nature to practice it, and my success in it is now as sure as fate. I enter and go down with the water in the very center of its whirl, and come up again with it when it whirls the other way. I follow the way of the water, and do nothing contrary to it of myself. This is how I tread it." Confucius said, "What do you mean by saying that you began to learn the art at the very earliest time, that as you grew up it became your nature to practice it, and that your success in it now is as sure as fate?" The man replied, "I was born among these hills, and lived contented among them. That was why I say that I have trod this water from my earliest time. I grew up by it, and have been happy treading it. That is why I said that to tread it had become natural to me. I know not how I do it, and yet I do it. That is why I say that my success is as sure as fate." And that's the end of the first story. Here we have Confucius, who sees a man diving into and swimming through deadly rapids beneath a massive waterfall where no fish can survive, yet the man emerges unharmed and joyful. When asked his secret, he replies that he learned to swim young, grew up with it as his nature, and now succeeds, quote, "as sure as fate." He enters the water's downward whirl and rises with its upward currents. He doesn't fight the water, he becomes one with it. This story beautifully captures Wuwei in a high-risk environment, adapting completely to changing forces rather than resisting them. It's a favorite metaphor for staying relaxed and responsive in combat, flowing with an opponent's energy instead of clashing against it. All right, so the next story is from the same chapter, and I'm calling it Zhuangzi, Training Fighting Roosters. Zhuangzi was rearing a fighting rooster for the king. Being asked after 10 days if the bird were ready, he said, "Not yet." He is still vain and quarrelsome and relies on his own vigor. Being asked the same after another 10 days, he said, "Not yet." He still responds to the crow and the appearance of another bird. After 10 days more, he replied, "Not yet." He still looks angrily and is full of spirit. When a fourth 10 days had passed, he replied to the question, "Nearly so. Though another rooster crows, it makes no change in him. To look at him, you would say he was a rooster of wood. His quality is complete. No other rooster will dare to meet him, but will run from him." The peak of fighting. Oh, sorry, that was the end of the story. The peak of fighting is a state of perfect composure where no real fight is needed. The presence alone deters. This resonates deeply with internal martial artists who emphasize listening energy, that is Tingjin, stillness, and discouraging aggression through centered non-aggression. There is another story this reminds me of, the Neko no Myojutsu, sometimes translated as The Mysterious Technique of the Cat by Issai Chozanshi, who, incidentally, also wrote the Tengu Sermon on the Martial Arts, which gave this podcast its name. His cat story also, I think, captures this idea of the rooster. I'll need to do a full episode on this story at some point, but I'll give you the short version here. So there's a samurai. He's got a rat problem. This rat has taken over one of his rooms. The samurai's cat can't run it off. A number of local famous mousers from the village just get beat up and run off by the rat. Until, out of frustration, the samurai takes a bokken, that is a wooden sword, and runs around trying to kill the rat himself. The rat was so nimble and fierce that the samurai broke out into a cold sweat and retreated. Well, after this failure, he travels to another town to borrow a cat who he hears is the best. This cat wasn't much to look at. An old cat, not particularly inspiring, but the samurai decides he may as well try putting the cat in the room. To his amazement, the rat stands frozen in place. This old cat leisurely walks across the room and drags the rat away as if it were nothing. The story then has all the other cats gather that night to talk to this old cat about his technique. The failed cats go around talking about their training and methods. Each represents a different approach to combat or problem solving. A fierce, powerful cat charges aggressively with claws and teeth bared, relying on brute strength and intimidation. The rat evades and counterattacks, biting the cat and driving it away. A, air quotes, spiritual cat uses mental focus and ki, that is chi or life energy, to try to overwhelm the rat psychologically, staring it down without moving. The rat remains unfazed and escapes. A technically proficient cat employs clever feints, agility, and strategy, circling and probing for weaknesses. Despite its skill, the rat anticipates every move and defeats it. Then we get to the successful old cat, who humbly explains that true mastery isn't about strength, spiritual power, or technical prowess alone. Instead, it involves a state of no mind, again, mushin, where one acts naturally without conscious effort, intention, or separation between self and opponent. The old cat describes how it once trained under similar, flawed approaches, but transcended them by embodying harmony with the universe, responding instinctively without forcing outcomes. The younger cats realize they've been overthinking or striving too hard, which created openings for defeat. The story ends with the samurai overhearing this wisdom and applying it to his own swordsmanship, emphasizing that ultimate skill lies beyond deliberate practice, in a realm of spontaneous, effortless perfection. Now, as you've probably already guessed, the story strongly relates to Wuwei. this concept of non-action or effortless action, achieving results through alignment with the natural flow of things rather than forceful intervention. Zhuangzi was obviously influenced by both Zen and Taoism when he uses the old cat as a metaphor for this principle in martial contexts. The old cat's success comes not from trying to dominate the rat, but from a passive, harmonious state where action arises organically without ego, planning, or resistance. The other cats in this story are analogs for the rooster in his different stages of training. And like the rooster in its final form, the old cat's very presence is a deterrence to the rat. Sometimes you'll see the same thing among packs of dogs, where one dog who is not the loudest or the most aggressive, or even sometimes the largest, rules the pack through simply its existence. It will break up fights between other dogs by calmly and assertively interposing itself between them. And surprisingly, the other dogs often roll over in submission. This mirrors Wuwei's idea of doing without doing, like the swimmer at the waterfall, where overexertion, as shown by the other cats, leads to failure, while yielding to the Tao, the way, ensures victory. In Japanese terms, this aligns with Mushin, no mind, which is a Zen adaptation of Wuwei, often taught in Budo, that is martial ways, to encourage instinctive, unhindered performance. The story critiques rigid techniques and promotes a philosophical depth that's central to Taoist thought, making it a direct illustration of Wuwei applied to conflict resolution. These stories emphasize that high skill isn't about brute force, rigid forms, or winning at all costs. Instead, it's about cultivating a mind that's empty yet responsive, a body that's aligned with natural patterns, and an approach that turns potential conflict into effortless flow. If you're training a particular style like Tai Chi push hands, Wing Chun, or even MMA with internal influences, these tales offer timeless philosophical principles for transcending mechanical technique towards something more alive and adaptive. Maybe if I get my act together at some point, I'll be able to say I'm training BJJ with internal influences. We'll see. Thanks for tuning in to Walking with the Tengu. If you enjoyed this, hit subscribe, leave a review, and let me know in the comments. Which of these ideas resonates most with your own practice?